Welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who's taking a snow day. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. Working from home snow day, I guess is what we're doing?
Yes, what we're both doing. So We're not in the office because the roads were treacherous.
Indeed.
So we are recording from home. We can't look each other in the eye as we talk, Taylor.
We cannot. I did enjoy last night when I texted you a joke about it snowing. You thought I was serious. That's always fun.
I did actually. I'd been sort of buried in some work I was doing, some copywriting, and your text got me to look out the window, and that's when I saw the whiteness everywhere.
Yeah, I texted Daryl. I think it might snow tonight. I think it might snow tonight. You heard it here first, and Daryl was like, "No, I heard that earlier." And I was like, I really was about to be like, "Look out your window, Daryl."
But here we are. Yeah. Here we are, recording the Total Soccer Show, even on a snow day.
Indeed.
So we've got 5 listener questions that we're going to answer today. All of them gold. Fried gold, as they say.
Do they say that? Is that a thing?
The Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg and those guys. That was a phrase they used a lot for when something was really good. Fried gold. So the first fried gold question is from Billy Harding. You ready, Taylor?
I am. I'm still pondering fried gold, because isn't like gold like famously very malleable? Like, couldn't it melt? Like, could you have like
It's not something that makes sense. Don't overthink it.
I just feel like that didn't work out for Viserion in Game of Thrones, and that's all I'm going to say there. Viserys, not Viserion.
Things not so good for Viserion either. Yeah. Billy Harding wants to know, why does the Premier League play 3 matches for each team around Christmas/New Year's when other leagues like La Liga and the Bundesliga take a break? Is there some historical significance to it, i.e., like with the NFL playing on Thanksgiving with the Lions and the Cowboys? I've always felt this was an advantage for the top 6 teams that could financially sustain deeper rosters.
Yes.
What do you think, Taylor? Why do they do this?
I think, as with many things, it is commercialism connected to tradition. Is what I have written down.
That should be the Premier League slogan.
Yeah, it really should be, and maybe kind of is informally. But my guess is that basically, like, you have Boxing Day, which I think is a uniquely British holiday, or at least it started as a British holiday. I think.
Isn't it? So it's just a uniquely British naming convention, right? Like, everybody has the day after Christmas off work, but we just decided to come up with a name for it. You know what I mean? Like in Ireland, it's St. Stephen's Day, but everybody gets the day off work still.
But I think, and this part I know about Boxing Day without having researched it. I don't know why I know this. Maybe it's because my wife likes Downton Abbey. But it comes from, I think one of the possible explanations is that it's like, it comes from, like, the servants were working on Christmas Day historically in British society, so the day after is when they would celebrate Christmas. So it is like a British convention of having this, like, official day after Christmas that people still celebrate, and that's why you do still have that day off, I think. So,
all right, well, Billy didn't ask why is it called Boxing Day.
Right.
Billy asked, why does the Premier League play 3 matches for each team around Christmas, New Year's? And in actual fact, I looked at the schedule before getting into this. It's actually 4 matches.
Really?
This year anyway, because they kept to a schedule of playing every Saturday as you normally would, right? Roughly the games are centered around each Saturday. That's a match week. But then on top of that, there are games on Boxing Day and New Year's Day. So there are actually 4 games over the course of the festive season. So the Saturday the 23rd, then the 26th, Boxing Day, then Saturday the 30th, and then January 1st, New Year's Day. That's why Jurgen Klopp's not happy and Pep Guardiola's not happy.
Right, but I think this is where I'm saying the tradition connects to commercialism, because you do have lots of different people having that time period off, and so they're looking for something to do. I can speak to that because I know that people like to turn on the football game when there's nothing else going on at the family get-togethers. So I think that's kind of the idea behind it. So then if you have the teams playing during that festive period, you're going to have a lot of eyes, if not a lot more eyes, watching those games. And since you've got all those other countries on break, you, at least up until recently, had 100% of the market share. So it sort of is like, we're honoring family tradition that you guys are all home together, and now you can watch soccer, and also maybe give us some money to our advertisers.
All right, so I've done the research, and you're not wrong that, you know, the Premier League exerts a powerful commercial, it has a really good grab commercially over the festive period because it's the only thing on and people are off work, right? So that's an argument for doing it right now. But historically, the reason that games are played sort of around the festive period, it's because people are off work.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same reason. So everybody had sort of, games used to be on Christmas Day until the 50s. There used to be sort of the regular schedule plus a load of games on Christmas Day. Up until the 1957 to 58 season, there was always a game on Christmas Day, full list of fixtures. And I think people started feeling a bit like, it's kind of weird to be playing on Christmas Day. You know, it's supposed to be a day where everyone's with their families. So that's why they switched it to Boxing Day. But the main reason is that nobody's at work. It's the same reason that games are traditionally Saturday 3:00, right? That's the traditional English kickoff time, Saturday 3:00, because there was a law passed in 1850 that all factories closed by 2 p.m. on Saturday. So everybody was available to go and watch. And it just extends out to these extra holidays that you have. It would be like if in the US, if we always had games on July 4th, right? Because everyone's off, everyone's available to go watch some soccer.
Yeah, and that's also why historically British teams have slashed ticket prices to allow those factory workers to go to games. No, they haven't. That's a lie. That doesn't happen.
Oh,
fun stuff.
So
fun stuff.
Can we talk festive fixtures a little bit? Because I thought you and I had an interesting conversation off air, which I was kind of getting at the idea that basically soccer gets crazy over Christmas and New Year's in England, and you almost can't read too much into the results because everybody's tired, everybody's injured, everybody's like resting their players, or the players like holding a little back for the next game, all that kind of stuff. That I think Mourinho is the example I was using, that it's really not worth looking at their sort of bad-ish run over the festive period where, they had too many draws in a row and saying that like this proves that Mourinho is doing something wrong. I think it's just, crazy stuff happens. And if you get out of that festive period without losing all the games, you're doing not too badly.
I think he would probably agree with you. It's a strange thing because I feel like I would have agreed with Billy even up to like looking into the fixtures, but then like with his point I would have agreed with him on like it benefits the top six. But if you look at Man United specifically, they struggled a lot in this period, and I think it is because you have so many games in such a short time frame, and especially I think they played like one more because of the League Cup, but I'm sure other teams did too. But it still is, I think, that then if you were sort of like trying to get some fresh legs and you do have a few injuries and you're trying to rotate and you come up against, say, Burnley, who have a very like resolute system and they know what they're doing, it can be problematic if you are that team trying to rotate.
Yeah, I can see Billy's point that if you've got a deeper roster, as the bigger teams do, or a deeper roster of quality at least, then it theoretically could advantage you to be playing more games. But you've got more to lose if you're one of the bigger teams, right?
Yeah.
So if you're one of the big teams, you want a smoother path because people get angry at you if you draw 2-2 with Burnley.
What I would be, I don't know how you could track this, but like I would be interested to see how Burnley's record, like not Burnley specifically, but like that type of like that size club, how their record in the like kind of Christmas window, holiday window corresponds with the end of the season, because that's where I feel like they actually get hit, whereas the big six sides don't. I think Burnley can go 100% in those games because they're focused on let's get 40 points, let's make sure we've got safety, then we'll see what happens after that. United or City or Chelsea or whomever, they're more focused on like spreading it out, making sure that they've got players ready to go at the end of the season for that title push, for the Champions League, for FA Cup, for whatever. And so I think you have more like consistency and performance throughout the season for those top 6-7 sides versus the sides that maybe can push and get those results in December.
Worth noting that when we say top 6/7, I think Burnley are 7th in the Premier League right now.
It's a weird thing, and it is like, and that's why I say like I feel weird making that point because I'm not trying to do disservice to Burnley because they have obviously earned that
I raised
spot.
them, right? It's my fault. I brought them up because it was a game that maybe we could say Leicester, because on the late equaliser against Manchester United that Leicester scored, people seem to be kind of mad at Mourinho and Man United for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, and I think people were plenty upset with Burnley, and I think the example works because there is no chance that at the beginning of the season the Burnley board told Sean Dyche, we expect a top 7 finish. Like that wasn't a thing. It was keep us up, maybe challenge like for one of the cup competitions or see what you can do. But there's definitely not any sort of make the Champions League or you're done, whereas there is for a lot of other teams. Again,
I would recommend reading Rory Smith's article about Burnley for the New York Times about their sort of the way they limit quality opportunities. It's really, really interesting. Final word I want to say on the festive fixture period, which is what I've decided to call it, is Manchester City. With everything we just said, Manchester City have done really well to get through that period, only dropping 2 points. Right, so they had that one draw, which weirdly felt like a disaster at the time. But actually, to just keep winning, only drop 2 points is really, really good with the number of games that are played. And even then, Guardiola was saying, I think he literally used the phrase, it's killing players to be playing this, which I think he's just been a bit dramatic. But essentially, that's still a good run for them over Christmas.
That's an important position on that literally, because you can say he literally said it's killing players, but if he said it's literally killing players, it takes on a different tone.
Ready for the next question?
Yes,
and thank
sir.
you to Billy for that question.
Riley,
good luck to Southampton for the rest of the season. I know Billy's a Southampton fan.
There we are. Some money to spend. Riley Champine asks or says, I'm a graphic designer / cartographer for National Geographic magazine and a huge soccer fan. Unfortunately, National Geographic decided to reduce its World Cup coverage due to the recent unpleasantness. That makes sense. But
I love that we've popularized that phrase.
It permeates, baby. But in a stroke of luck, I was assigned a 2-page spread in the July 2018 issue, which will line up nicely with the tournament in Russia. I have provisionally pitched making a map related to the World Cup for this spread, and that theme was well received by the decision makers for the issue. I enjoy how you both transcend talking about just results and action on the fields to discuss culture and politics of the game as well. It's that grander meaning that I often find to be the most fascinating and unique part of the sport. So my question is, if you had 2 pages in National Geographic to present a map or infographic about the World Cup, what would you make it about?
Ooh, okay, so I'm really excited that we got this question because we might see it in the pages of Nat Geo represented eventually. But I have a hard time answering it because I don't think I have a very good sort of visual brain, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Like I keep picturing a page full of text, which I don't think is what Riley wants to do as a cartographer, right?
Yeah.
The best idea I could come up with is to take the 32 countries that are going to be at the World Cup and have 32 photos that represent soccer in those countries. And I'm thinking of something like in England, if you think of the origins of soccer as a working class sport, like we just talked about the 2 p.m. factory creating the 3 p.m. kickoff time, maybe like a picture of like a working class neighborhood with, there's goals painted on the wall type thing. I grew up playing on some of those fields, and there's in some ways to me those represent English football in a way. So maybe a spread of 32 photos, each representing football in that country. Do you know the Instagram feed Where Is Football? You ever seen that?
No.
It's really good. It's photos, like really good soccer photos from all over the world, like at professional games and, kids kicking a ball around and various things like that. So if you could find a way to represent all 32 countries in like a really striking photo for each one, I think that would be really good. Obviously, it's a lot of work to source those photos.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of this is going to be a lot of work. So
yeah, that's true. That's why Nat Geo is so good, though, right? It's never just cobbled together.
Credit to you for saying Nat Geo. I fought that urge the entire time. So yours is more infographic then map.
No, that's not an infographic. That's just a bunch of photos, which is why I think I've slightly failed at this assignment.
I see. Gotcha.
Maybe for an infographic, what you could have is just a bunch of like facts about each country on a map. Maybe sort of like when the first professional league was founded in that country, who the best player was from that country, what's the furthest that country has ever gone in a World Cup, like printed onto a map somehow, maybe.
Okay.
That's the best I got. What you got?
So mine is a little more out there, but I like it a lot. And I should note that I asked my wife this question because she tends to have kind of like out of the box ideas for things, and this is like her.
It sounds like that's what Riley's after as well.
Yeah, and this is her idea that I have like morphed into my idea. But basically, I want it to be like a map of the world, a world map, if you will, that shows basically the 32 qualified nations. So you emphasize those, but then it's a little bit sort of my idea is like if you've ever seen like a map on the history of music or like the history of rock and roll, and it shows you how it all like spreads and connects and goes all over the place.
Yeah.
It's this, but it basically connects national teams, their dual national players, with the other countries that they connect to. Because essentially every single national team that's qualified has, I would say, at least 4 to 5 players that will be in their final squad or are eligible for that final squad selection who connect to other places around the world. And I think a big part of that is, number one, it kind of emphasizes the idea that it is this like global game. And it also shows that like immigration factors significantly into the national team makeup of like literally every single team. And that's kind of what I like, because I think so often with the World Cup we hear, oh, it's the world's game, it's the biggest sporting stage, it's around the world. But people might think like, oh, it's just 32 countries, it's a bunch of European nations, is it really that connected? But to have a map that shows you, oh no, like Suriname and Cape Verde are like involved in this World Cup. Much more of Africa than people might realize is like has an interest or has a part in this World Cup because of where the people have come from. I think that could have, it could be very visually impressive, but also very meaningful as well.
Could I build slightly on top of this and say, like, take that idea, but not just the dual national players, but also sort of like where you could have other lines going to other countries, connecting them, sort of where each country's coach is from, like where the founder of like various of the league is from. Maybe like for example, there'd be a lot of things going from England to other countries, right? Because they sent guys over and like spread the word about football or all that kind of stuff. So any connection between one country and another country could serve to emphasize the global nature of soccer.
Yeah, that's certainly doable. I think that one is a little bit harder because then it gets into your, like, what do you interpret as an impact? Like, is like, well, we gave them that name or we gave them that style in 1932. But like I think like so it could be cool to show how like this Russian team got their name from an Austrian team in 1911. Like that is kind of interesting. Or like this style of play, which was made famous by the Dutch, actually came from here. Or something.
So you'd be including countries that didn't make the World Cup as well, which would be interesting. Right?
That's my point. Is because I think that people like I'm trying to think of an example here. Like if you look at like. The entire French team, for example, is like almost all of – that's not true. A lot of the French team comes from countries or has connections to countries either were born there or their parents were born there.
Former French colonies.
Yeah, I mean, Blaise Matuides has a connection to Angola, Mangala to DR Congo, Sissoko to Mali. I did some research. Valbuena was born in Spain, Benzema, Algeria, Paul Pogba, Guinea, Mamadou Sakho, Senegal. So you have like all
I like
of these.
To pretend you just have that information off the top of your head.
Some of it I had off the top of my head. Other ones, but I think it's also interesting because other ones I didn't know. Like, do you know where Gonzalo Higuain was born?
In France.
Yes, correct. Yeah, he is I think part Basque.
You kind of gave it away.
Did I? Oh, just by saying that he wasn't born in Argentina?
Yeah, and we were talking about France. So,
I mean, I didn't even mean that connection. But yeah, I mean, and then you've got like what, half the Swiss team have connections to, if not more, have connections to other countries for various reasons. Yeah. And so I think it shows really like how geopolitical and historical issues spread and affect the current makeup of national teams. So it isn't just like, oh, Germany are really, really good because they have really good academies. That is definitely part of it.
Well, yeah. So the other interesting part to me about this is it maybe would serve to dissuade some people of some notions about soccer. And I'm thinking specifically have you seen comedians in cars getting coffee?
Every now and then I've seen a couple episodes.
So there's an episode with Jerry Seinfeld and Trevor Noah, and they're talking about the World Cup. I think might be in the run-up to the 2014 World Cup, right? And Seinfeld goes on this Seinfeld doesn't watch soccer, right? But he goes on this long-ish like bit that he does about how he loves the World Cup because the players look like what you think they would look like. Like when you see the German team, it's all like tall, blonde guys. And I remember sitting there thinking, that is not correct. You haven't, unless you're just looking at Bastian Schweinsteiger, you're not realizing how globally connected soccer is. So it's almost like there is an old mindset that maybe is how soccer looked decades ago. And people like Seinfeld maybe haven't understood that it is now really is a global game, even in the way national teams are constructed.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find that example anymore outside of, I'm going to say, Russia. I think that still pretty much conforms. But outside of that, yeah, I mean, it reminds me of when my dad is not a big tattoo fan, and he used to really enjoy soccer because soccer players didn't have many tattoos at a time when lots of other professional athletes did, and he still kind of holds on to that idea, and I feel like maybe that's because he doesn't watch a lot of soccer on a regular basis. Otherwise, he would maybe recognize that is no longer the case.
All right, Taylor, so I genuinely like your idea.
Thank you.
I like it better than mine. That pains me to say. But I do think that sometimes, even when you and I have good ideas, our listeners have even better ideas. So what I'd like to do is maybe open this up to any input from TSS listeners that they'd like to share with Riley. What we'll do is we'll put a page on the Total Soccer Show website. The URL is going to be totalsoccershow.com/NatGeo, N-A-T-G-E-O, like as all one word. And it'll be like a form you can fill out with your idea for what Riley could do with a 2-page spread in National Geographic magazine. And then that will populate a spreadsheet that we'll share with Riley. So all the information will automatically be shared with Riley. So totalsoccershow.com/NatGeo. Taylor, could I lean on you to maybe put a link in the show notes?
Seems like a whole thing.
I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, please share your ideas at totalsoccershow.com/NatGeo. Next question, Taylor?
Yes, sir.
All right. Next question comes from Colin Marshall. Colin wants to know, or says, I always start as if it's a question, but then there's a statement at the front. Right?
I did that as well.
Colin says, I am a new supporter of Major League Soccer. Just got tickets for the first season of LAFC. Hello, Benny Feilhaber.
Yeah, good time.
I think Colin sent this question before the Feilhaber signing, but we saw that yesterday on social media, right?
Yeah, he has done the hat raise. That means he's officially an LAFC player.
Great signing. What exactly is a young designated player in Major League Soccer, asks Colin. So this really is sort of someone taking their first steps into MLS and looking at all the acronyms and rules and regulations and thinking, what does all this mean? So what is a young designated player in Major League Soccer? How does it differ from a regular designated player other than their age? I did the research to make sure we got the correct answer, Taylor, but I want to sort of test your knowledge top of your head. Unlike the French national team, without doing any research, what's your answer?
I feel like Colin, with that question, has like sort of done the I would like an omelet, but I don't want eggs to be involved. I don't think you can say how is it different other than age, because that is the fundamental point of it, right? Is that they wanted, from my understanding at least, that they wanted to get more young players who were not from the United States into the league, rather than have it just be Frank Lampard near the end of his career, maybe coming for a final paycheck, Steven Gerrard the same. But you have to then make that possible, and so I'm assuming it's essentially, this is the part that always trips me up, is that I think you can pay them less, less of it counts towards the salary cap, but you can still pay them more that doesn't hit the salary cap. Does that make sense, or should I clarify that a bit more?
I'm going to give you a B-, because
okay.
It's not bad.
Right.
So it was essentially the clubs themselves, as I understand it, were saying that, we want to get some younger designated players, but we're kind of taking a gamble on young designated players, right? Because they're not already big names like, say, Frank Lampard that will pull people in, but they might be quality players, but we don't know. So if we're going to spend all this money on it, can you sort of give us some incentive to do so, to make it a little easier on us? And essentially all that happens is with a young designated player, if you're 23 years old or younger, the amount of money that goes on the salary cap is reduced.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Why am I getting a B- for this? I feel like that was a B+.
Because you didn't give the exact numbers. That's why you get a B-.
All right, I'm going to take it. What is the designated player amount?
The designated player amount for 2017 was the first $480,000 of a player's salary goes onto the sort of the actual roster budget, and then the rest is paid by the team. So for a young designated for a young designated player, how much do you think it is, Taylor?
$150,000.
Sort of.
What?
It is. So it's $200,000 for players
that was my
21,
first guess. Darn it.
21 to 23, and then players 20 or younger, it's $150,000. So essentially, a young designated player just gives you more space in your salary cap, even to play with. So it's not such a big hit on your salary cap to sign them as a DP.
Man, I appreciate these types of questions because they kind of force me to go back and look at this stuff again. It really does give me a little bit of a headache, though. It reminds me of when my wife was studying for the LSAT, and she would ask me to help her. We'd go over a question, and I would just really maybe 80% of the time I'd be like, my head hurts. I don't know how this works. And it is sort of when you start looking into different rules in Major League Soccer, it's well, are you looking for the 2012 iteration or the 2014 iteration or the 2015 rule change that deleted that other? It's all so interconnected that it makes my brain sort of hurt.
So I hope we answered Colin's question. You know what we should do is, as part of our MLS 2018 preview, I mean, we usually do our specific predictions for each conference. We should do a terminology special show, right? And just do all the MLS terminology, GAM and TAM and DPs and young DPs and allocation order and all that stuff.
That sounds like a really fun show for you to do with someone else.
You notice I didn't say all that good stuff.
Did you notice that I said with someone else?
I did, but I think I can talk you around.
Yeah,
I've got a couple of months.
We'll see.
I've got a couple of months to talk you around.
That's
so,
true.
Colin, I hope we answered your question.
Give me some of that fried gold. Maybe you convince me.
It's in the mail. So we have a couple more questions to go that I'm excited to answer.
And some news.
We also have and some news later in the show. Yeah, some Wolves news maybe. But first we have a sponsor with a big soccer conversation in the middle of it. And that means it's a Howler Magazine ad, Taylor. The Howler Magazine winter issue is coming out soon. You've seen the front cover. Would you mind describing it once again for our listeners?
Oh,
they're not shocked when they see it.
Well, it's a little difficult for me, I got to say, because we've got the PDF copy, right? And I tend to go right past it, but I believe it is a reference to the. I'm going to say we're just going to go recent unpleasantness, but it's a large explosion. It's a giant eyeball with a teardrop coming out of it, and inside the eyeball is a nuclear explosion. Is it a teardrop though, or is it blood? Because that really informs my interpretation.
It's something not good, put it that way, with a red background. It really is sort of like red alert. Because the cover story and sort of the main feature in there is all about what happened, how the US failed to qualify for the World Cup. And it's rather cheekily headlined, titled, What Happened? And we all know what that's in reference to.
Yes.
So the feature story is by Jeff Reuter. I read it this morning in preparation for our show. I did have this feeling while reading it of, okay, this is terrible to read, obviously. Like, not that it's a bad story. That the events are sort of...
You might want to clarify that.
The events are heartbreaking to read. Jeff knows we're a big fan of his work, right? But I did have the feeling of like, oh, I'm sort of getting paid to read a soccer magazine here because Howler's going to sponsor our show. So that was a really good feeling. I feel like I'd made it as a professional magazine reader.
Oh, yeah? Is that a thing?
I mean, kind of, if you tell yourself that. Yeah. It's kind of like when I worked in a grocery store, Safeway, when I was a teenager. And one shift, my friend Kevin and I kind of just played soccer in the upstairs warehouse because no one could see us for 4 hours. So technically, we were professional soccer players for 4 hours.
Is that how that works?
The same sort of scenario. I mean, in my head, yes. It's on my resume and no one's ever questioned it.
Then I believe multiple times in the Copa America Centenario and Euro 2016 tournaments, you and I were professional footballers as well. Or professional soccer tennis players, at least.
Professional soccer tennis
Professional
players.
Indoor soccer tennis players. It gets worse and worse every time.
The world's first. World's first. Anyway, back to Jeff's article. It's titled What Happened? Mm-hmm. And I think the really smart thing about this article is that it doesn't go for, here's the main reason, here's the only reason the US failed to qualify for the World Cup. It essentially breaks it out into, I didn't even count them, but it's like 10 or more different reasons for why the US failed to qualify for the World Cup. And then the central argument is that you can blame one thing. You can blame that Clint Dempsey's shot hit the post, as Sunil Gulati did. Or you can say, here are the multiple reasons why this happened.
Yeah, and I think that is one of my favorite parts about it, is that it is, I think if it were 4 pages of text about, like, just a wall of text about, like trying to establish a narrative of what went wrong, it's not really going to work, and it also isn't going to be very pleasant to read. But because, as you pointed out, it's broken into different parts, each of which focuses on a different thing, it is sort of like, oh, let me read about Pro Rel versus let me read about what Arena did versus what Klinsmann did versus what happened on the day of the game. And you sort of get all of the different information in manageable chunks that maybe won't break your soul as much.
That's true, right? And I would say if you're people like us who are kind of immersed in the soccer world, it's still interesting because each little piece, which is maybe, I want to say each thing is like maybe 300 or 400 words. It's really tightly written by Jeff, and it has some really interesting ideas in there. There's going to be something in each one that maybe you hadn't thought of before. But if you're kind of newish to soccer, like say Colin Marshall, right, who's just getting into MLS for the first time maybe, there's a lot of information there that a lot of people won't have thought about before. So I think it's good as like an overview for people who are newer to soccer, and it's good as a bunch of interesting different angles for people who are already into soccer.
Agreed. And I would say my final point on it is that it also, like, it's nice to read something that doesn't necessarily feel the need to find solutions for all this. Like, I think it's okay just to say, this is an issue, this was a problem, development is an issue, we need to figure out how to deal with this. And it kind of like it's like the introduction to the issues that then can allow you to pursue those areas if you so choose, without being like, and here is the way to fix that, because I don't think, because that would be disingenuous to be like, here is the solution to this giant problem, I'm going to write it in 3 sentences.
And so just to give everyone a quick overview, there was bad luck, Bruce Arena, Major League Soccer, players maybe not that good, pay to play, pay to coach, which was the interesting one to me. Like, I found out that the US, to get an A license in the US is $4,000. In Germany, it's $600. So think about that for a second. The sort of overly competitive and short window of college soccer, which maybe doesn't help with development. The absence of pro rel, which, you know, there aren't, especially because teams don't develop at like a local level and then sell players up.
If we read every single topic, are we kind of giving the entire article away?
No, because I'm not giving you the details of each thing.
All right.
Yeah. So but weirdly, the thing that stuck out to me the most was I saw Travis Clark's name in a sidebar.
Yep. And it was good. It was about development in Montana.
What if we missed the Montana Mares?
Yeah.
And then he goes on to sort of list, like, it's about sort of talent identification. And it closes with a beautifully alliterative version of like, what if we missed the Wyoming Willian or the Dakota DeRossi and a couple others as well. Bravo to Travis for that piece.
Indeed. Well done, Travis. Well done, Howler, as always.
Yeah. I would really recommend reading this feature story as well as all the other stories in the January issue of Howler. It hasn't shipped yet, so you can still subscribe to Howler with our 20% discount using the discount code TSS14. That's TSS14. I don't know why it's 14. Maybe that's because the last time we qualified for the World Cup.
Yeah.
The URL is FIFA.wtf/gethowler. FIFA.wtf. I know George, the editor, loves that URL. FIFA.wtf/gethowler, and the discount code is TSS14 for 20% off a subscription to Howler Magazine.
There we are. Thank you to Howler for sponsoring today's program. Now, Diogo, should we get back to questions or should we get to some news?
Oh, you want to do the news?
Sure.
Okay. The big news for me is it's really a continuation of our transfer rumors. Mm-hmm. It's that Wolves have been linked with the return of Robbie Keane. Robbie Keane to Wolves for at least the rest of the season.
I cannot figure out why you're so excited about this other than nostalgic purposes.
Yes, nostalgic purposes. I mean, I went back. So for people who don't know, Robbie Keane, who's, he's been around, but he made his debut for Wolves.
That's an understatement.
17-year-old. Yeah. What? Which part?
That he's been around.
Yes. But one of the earliest things Robbie Keane did was choose Wolves over Liverpool because he thought there was a better path to the first team, and it turned out to be a smart choice because he was in the first team pretty fast, like a year later, and he scored 2 goals in his debut more than 20 years ago. Robbie Keane made his debut for Wolves.
Maybe he should have really trusted himself when he chose Wolverhampton over Liverpool, because he did end up at Liverpool, did not go well.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, his eventual move to Liverpool did not go so well. But we had a great couple of years out of a teenage Robbie Keane, and I've always wanted him to come back to Wolves. I never thought it would happen. I think now is the perfect time because obviously Wolves are in a good upswing, right? We're doing really well. We're sort of, I think, about 10 points clear at the top of the championship. It might be 11 at this point. He wouldn't be sort of the guy that we'd be building our team around and relying on.
Oh, no?
He would be
a 37-year-old forward? No?
Well, exactly, right? But that would be a problem if that's what we were doing. It'd be like a desperate gamble, right? But instead, he'd be sort of a backup to Bonatini, who would be, you could really rely on him to come on and play 30 minutes here and there. I think it'd be an absolutely wonderful thing. And the worst thing is the last time we saw Robbie Keane in proximity to Wolves, he was on loan at Aston Villa and scored a hat-trick against us and helped us get relegated. So I think he owes us a little bit to get us back up.
I am still sort of baffled by your enthusiasm about this, because I get it, like, you want Robbie Keane to come back, but to your point, it was a couple years. It was not as though he, like, played there for 15 years, then went and played for or, like, it wasn't even like a Wayne Rooney thing where he, like, had the first 6 or 8 years of his career were with the club developing up and then moved. It was like, what, 2 seasons, 3 seasons max?
Yeah, it doesn't mean there's any less love. It was also, it kind of coincides with my teenage years and my love of soccer.
Now I see.
Going to Molineux and briefly watching Robbie Keane partner Steve Bull, which was, really, really made me feel like the future, anything could happen for Wolves in the future. And
which of his boyhood clubs is this for him? I'm just curious.
His actual first boyhood club.
Okay, and not the other 7?
Hey, I am not accepting your cynicism on this. I think you should let me have my romance and nostalgia and my enjoyment of Robbie Keane possibly going to Wolves. It's only a rumour. We don't know if it's happening or not. He's still under contract with an Indian team. I think Wolves are optimistic they can maybe get him out of that contract and sign him for January.
I think it's just for me that like you tend to be the more pragmatic one, and I tend to be the one who's like, what about this random idea? and so when you first told me about this, it was, I think your enthusiasm, like, I took that to mean, like, oh, man, it's going to be so good. Like, I'm really excited to see what he can do. And I was just sort of like, the 37-year-old guy? Like, really? That's who you're pumped about? But I get it.
Here's the other thing. Wolves have also signed a 20-year-old Spanish striker, Rafa Mir.
Yeah.
And the big story was that, like, Real Madrid were after him as well. So it was a big thing that they signed him. Mm-hmm. But I'm less excited about that because I think, as I've said to you off air a couple of times, most of Rafa Mir's games have been in the 3rd division for Valencia B, right? I think he's played 1 Champions League game where they brought him on to give him his debut. I think it was Wolves coach Nuno who did that for him. And I think he might have 1 senior league game. So he's very much unproven at anything above the 3rd division in Spain, which isn't that strong as I understand it. It's kind of regional.
I'm pretty sure Robbie Keane has never scored for a domestic league in the continent. Does that count?
He might have scored for Inter, so I think he did.
See, I don't think he did, because I feel like I remember this from his Wikipedia game. But, so I would just say that, like, you don't know what Rafa Mir is capable of for Wolverhampton in 2018, and you don't know what Robbie Keane is either. There you go.
So, yeah, I'm thinking maybe Robbie Keane goals in 2018, Rafa Mir goals in 2019. How about that? And Bonatini goals as well in between.
All right, that's fair.
Let me have my Molyneux optimism.
That's fine with me. A few other transfer notes, as we mentioned earlier. Benny Feilhaber has moved to LAFC. That was a move that I did not see coming.
Me neither, but it's smart. I think it's a really good move for LAFC.
Me too. I feel like Sporting KC are slowly losing the players that have made them Sporting KC in my mind. It's a little weird.
Yeah, but they're accumulating a lot of allocation money.
There is
so
that.
I think they might be about to sort of splash big somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe some sort of rebuild going on at Sporting KC.
Yeah, I would say that's probably very likely to occur, or already is. A couple other MLS notes. Barco, who we've been talking about. Is it Ezekiel Barco?
Yes.
Yeah, he did not show up for the first day of preseason because he is...
Independiente?
Yeah, he's boycotting because he wants that move to Major League Soccer.
Players are going on strike for moves to Major League Soccer.
There you go, man. There you go.
Yeah, I guess they'll be paying him some good money at Atlanta as well.
Yes, so it seems like won't be playing at home for a while, nor will DC United. Major League Soccer announced that DC United's home opener will be July 14th of 2018. That is a good, 3.5, 4 months into the season?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the logistics will be. Maybe we'll get them down in Richmond to play City Stadium.
I would have no problem with that.
Yeah, that would work for me.
That makes let's make it happen.
Yeah, let's make that happen. Maybe they can play LAFC there and we'll see Benny Feilhaber.
I'm sure they would all love the facilities. They're pretty similar to RFK, I would say.
Well, the commentary team facilities are probably worse than the player facilities, right?
That's
the
true.
players probably have better facilities than we do. Without getting into too much detail.
Yeah, let's leave it there. Anything else?
There was the Eric Winalda news that Grant Wall sort of asked the question that we've been wondering about Eric Winalda's US soccer presidential campaign. Sort of how much is it being financed by NASL owners Rocco Comiso and Ricardo Silva? And the answer seemed to be that only a little bit. I think there was Comiso had paid for a hotel room while Winalda was in New York. And Silva had maybe paid for some flights, and was funding something, but other funding was coming from Winalda's family. So I think I'd be on the high horse about there needs to be more transparency in the election.
You need to not be on the horse. Just
right, yeah, thank you. So I really like the idea that Grant Wall asked the question, which I'm really sort of proud of him for doing so, and that Winalda answered makes me feel makes me feel better about the whole process, if that makes sense.
All right, I'm with you. And final note, I think, is that the U.S. roster is soon to be announced.
Yes, the January camp roster. Stephen Goff of the Washington Post reports that the roster will be announced at noon Eastern on Monday. So look out for that. I guess we'll see who's on it. I think it will have 30 names on it. The only one that's accidentally confirmed so far is, I can't remember who it was, but someone at New York Red Bulls did a press conference about the team's sort of plans for the coming months and mentioned that Tyler Adams was going to be in the January camp. But that was to be expected.
It was indeed. I can't say I'm too surprised by that.
Yeah. So there you go. Also, wasn't there a story that so far the friendly against Bosnia will be at the StubHub Center in Carson, California, and that so far they've closed half the stadium, which suggests they're not expecting big ticket sales for this game.
No, I think they're probably not. I think that's probably fair. We'll see. Maybe more people are going to be enthusiastic about the new team. Maybe you get some young names in there. People get excited. But it is worth reminding everybody, that it is the January camp. It's not the official FIFA dates, so you're not going to be getting all of the European players in Liga MX as well, are not going to be called in. So just before we get those, why is Bobby Wood not there? Why is Weston McKennie not there? That's why.
Oh, we'll still get them. Also, worth reminding people that Liga MX starts January 27th. The game against Bosnia, I believe, is January 28th. That's why no Liga MX players in this January camp. Villafana was called up to the last one because he was out of favour at Santos Laguna, right? So don't expect to see Jonathan Gonzalez there, and we can keep panicking about Mexico trying to make contact with him.
Yeah, especially because that was the story today, right? Tom Marshall for ESPN FC saying that I guess they're going to test the waters, whatever that means. I feel like they've already been testing the waters, so I'm not as freaked out about that as I might have been otherwise.
There was an encouraging reference in there that essentially Osorio was not saying we're going to guarantee you a starting spot. It was kind of like you'll have to fight for a spot, like even a spot on the roster for the World Cup, along with everybody else. So it's not as if we're saying we'll definitely give you a World Cup spot and all will be good.
Yeah, I still think of it as like the Rocket Raccoon wink, or like Michael Scott when he mutes the phone temporarily. He's like, we're not going to guarantee you a starting spot. Yes, we are. Like, please play for us.
Okay, that was an impromptu sort of news roundup.
Yeah, there we go.
Which I quite enjoyed. We have 2 more listener questions, Taylor.
We sure do. The first one comes from Taylor Judd, who says, thinking about your pro-rail proposals, are you concerned with a more open system that we would lose geographic diversity, specifically in the top flight? I would worry about there being 5+ teams in each of New York and LA, similar to London and the Premier League. One of my favorite things about MLS is that there are great small market teams in Salt Lake, Portland, Nashville soon, and Columbus.
Short answer is no. I'm not concerned about that because I don't think that the size of the city guarantees that the teams will be good. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think with that, I would say, number one, while I understand like why you would look to the Premier League, the reality, and I'm not saying Taylor doesn't know this, but the reality is that the United States is not England. London is a giant city. It is the like place people end up living, I feel like, a lot of times in England. So you're going to have a larger population there. You're going to have more like opportunities for clubs to exist. I don't think you will.
Why isn't that true of, say, New York City or Los Angeles?
Because my point is simply that, like, how far away is Newcastle from London?
Oh, I see. Yeah, maybe 300 miles.
Right, and that is like the distance from Richmond to, like, I think maybe it's like longer than that to get to Philly. Like, my geography could be wrong here, but I
see what you're saying. Essentially, it's easier to go to London from anywhere in England than it is to go to New York from anywhere in the United States.
Yeah, so I don't think you're going to have like that level of fandom as a result, and I think you can see that like. It's difficult having 2 franchises there for Major League Soccer plus the Cosmos. You don't get a ton of fans turning out. And so I think you could have an ambitious owner come in with a bunch of money and say, I want to be a top flight team in New York, so I'm going to do that. And you can spend a bunch of money, but if you don't have people coming through the turnstiles, if you're not selling ads and sponsors, then you're not going to exist anymore. And so I think the market kind of controls itself in that regard.
And well-run teams in places like Salt Lake and Portland and Nashville and Columbus sort of will always be able to put a good quality team on the field, and that's what win games, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Your media market doesn't win games in an open system. That's kind of like almost a myth that the NFL and other closed leagues give you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And so I think you would end up, if you did have the like the relegation system, is that you're a relegation promotion system. See, still leading with relegation. That you would still be able to have your larger clubs do just fine. The smaller clubs continue to function. I think what you would end up having to have, though, is sort of that mentality shift. Because right now, I think one of the appeals for those small market teams is the idea that parity or relative parity allows everybody to compete. So year in, year out, we might be the champions. And to go all the way back to our earlier conversation, Burnley don't have that same approach to the season. Like, they're still a very good team, don't get me wrong, but they're not approaching it with, hey, we could probably win the Premier League if things go right. So I think it would require...
If we get the top draft pick.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that it would require, like, a kind of, like, a more, I guess, like, pragmatic or realistic approach to the season of, like, yeah, we're a small market club, but we're like existing and thriving, and we're bringing through young, exciting players, and we're emphasizing development. And maybe a couple years from now, we'll be in that position where people look at us and think, hey, that's the model that we want to be at, and maybe we are winning. But maybe in the meantime, we're existing, finishing mid-table, still making money, still succeeding, still thriving when other teams are falling off and getting relegated after spending way too much money.
And here's a couple of possible solutions if Taylor Judd, not Taylor Rockwell, is worried about this. Is it, say we do have like a top flight division with a pro-rail system. Essentially, if you shared the TV money around, then that means that, like, you know, Real Salt Lake can fill a stadium, so that's, you know, commercially taken care of. Real Salt Lake gets an equal cut of same as all the other teams of the TV money. So Real Salt Lake is theoretically then in as good a financial position as a team in New York City.
Yep, there we go.
Yeah, easy as that. I think actually what would happen is you would end up with smaller New York, Los Angeles, say Chicago or Houston teams in the lower divisions, which might be a good thing, right? Some like smaller competitors to the top flight teams.
Why would that? Why do you think that would be a good thing? I mean, I don't disagree. I don't disagree, but I'm like, why would like a smaller team in New York be important?
Because then you can have rivalries within the city that aren't necessarily in the top flight. And it also just means, you know, the giant population of New York City, if you've got multiple teams that maybe have academies or other outreach programs, then you're reaching more people, right?
Agreed.
And you got like more, you can have someone choose to go to the top flight game where a ticket costs, I don't know, $40, or you can go to like a local game where a ticket is $10 and get that more sort of intimate atmosphere where, you know, a hamburger doesn't cost $12, for example.
That's key. I would say the other element there would be that, like, maybe the smaller teams, because they're smaller, it gives them luxuries that other clubs wouldn't have. The one that comes most readily to mind for me is like a club like FC St. Pauli, who it sort of is like they can kind of do whatever they want. That's kind of their reputation. And I think about that with like RVAFC, who used to be here in Richmond, where it was like fans behind the goal and like having giant yellow cards to mock players when they get carded. And like can be a little bit more fan culture because you get more people in there because tickets are cheaper and you have just a different approach to the match day experience.
There you go. So, Taylor, I hope we've allayed any fears you have about sort of top-flight big city concentration.
Still confusing to me because we're talking about two different Taylors. Final question, Daryl. Do you want to read that one or do you want me to?
Oh, I'll do it. Philip Weiss. Philip Weiss, who I've got to thank him for helping me find many, many lost questions. So the spreadsheet that I was using that collects all the questions that people ask us, for some reason, on around mid-December, it started like messing with the dates. So these more recent questions disappeared into the middle of the document. When I said this on Twitter, like, oh no, I've lost all the questions. Can you resend any questions you've sent? Philip said, I can't remember if I sent mine before or after the cutoff date. So I looked for Philip's question and it was after the cutoff date, but it was lost in the middle. That's how I found it. So thank you, Philip. Your tweet saved all those questions. May even be all 4 questions that we've asked at the top of this show.
Well, thank you, Philip.
All right, so a quick thank you before the question, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, here's Philip's question. After reading the US Soccer Federation press release about managers like Jesse Marsh getting a coaching badge, this was the US Soccer Pro license, and seeing similar things for experienced Premier League managers, that would be the UEFA Pro license, what do they teach for these badges that is so valuable for managers who already have so much experience?
Well, first of all, I should say I'm not sure I fully understand Philip's question because I don't know if he is saying like what's the benefit of the pro, and if it's specifically that license, then like that's not a thing Premier League managers have to get. So I can't tell if he's saying like what are they teaching for coaching courses to begin with, or just this specific one.
Yeah, and actually there's 2 different things, right? There's the UEFA Pro license, which as I understand it, you do have to have in order to manage in a top flight in Europe. So a Premier League manager will have to have that. But UEFA will give you like a waiver for a year or 2 to go and get it. And then there's this, I think the thing that Philip was referring to with the press release is the US Soccer Pro license, which is a course that I think Jesse Marsh, Caleb Porter, and maybe a dozen other coaches. I
think I saw Richie Williams in there.
Richie Williams makes sense, yeah, like famous-ish coaches, right? Had to were invited to go and complete, but their jobs weren't dependent on it. I think it was an attempt to sort of raise the level of coaching education in the United States. So I think Philip's really asking about 2 different things.
But if we're talking about... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, if Philip is asking sort of what's the point of a coach who already theoretically knows what he's doing, going and doing another course, I would say it's as simple as saying that you can always be learning. And I feel like all the best coaches who aren't like 70 years old will say that, coaching is a thing of always learning the new ideas and the new techniques.
Yeah, I mean, I think like not to make this too... like serious, but like I equate it with like doctors. Like you're once you graduate law school, medical school, you're not just done. Like you keep having to go to seminars, you keep having to learn the new approach and how to do this and how to use that.
If you graduate law school and then start practicing medicine, then you've done 2 things wrong.
Yeah. But my point,
a bad doctor and you're breaking the law.
But my point is simply that like you have to keep evolving and changing and learning the new approach to things so that you can learn how to implement a 4-2-2-2 or a back 2 the way maybe Pep Guardiola might. So you can kind of like learn new approaches and then decide whether or not you want to incorporate that into your style of play.
Yeah, and there's always new things coming up, right? Like, half spaces and different pressing styles and all that kind of stuff. And, different sort of exercise and recovery, like physical stuff, regimes. In the US soccer thing, I really think it's a thing of just like trying to elevate everybody and getting Jesse Marsh et al. To sort of just learn some new things and raise the level of coaching in the United States. It's as simple as that.
There we are.
So that's what happens. So we can't say what happens on these courses because we haven't been on one. For some reason, we were not invited to the highest level coaching course in the United States, Taylor. Maybe the invitation got lost in the mail?
Sure, something like that. Or maybe we have no badges.
Yeah, but you have your D license, right?
I do.
But we can't say specifically what's on there, but we can say that all education is good, right? As long as they're not teaching Jesse Marsh, let's go long ball and put the big guy up front.
You never know, man. You never know.
So thank you to Billy, Riley, Colin, Taylor, and Philip for asking today's questions. If you've got a question for us, it's totalsoccershow.com/questions. questions. There is a form you can fill out there, and we'll be able to, thanks after Philip's help now, we'll be able to find all the questions that you ask us and answer them on future shows. If you subscribe at $10 a month or higher to TSS, we guarantee to answer one question a month.
There we are. And now, with that in mind, shall we move to scouting?
Yes, we have how many scouting reports? 4 scouting reports. Mm-hmm. One of them's a Wolves player, and one of them's American. So it's a good day. It's a good day for the Scouting Network.
It is indeed. I'll start us off. Connor Davis scouting Connor Ronan, 19-year-old Irish central midfielder for Portsmouth now. On loan, we should add. Yes. A year and 2 days after joining Wolverhampton, Connor and fellow youngster Sylvain Deslandes moved to Portsmouth on a loan until the end of the season. Connor has only played 254 minutes in the first team this season, so the loan should help him get more playing time. Portsmouth are currently 6th in League One and play 4-5-1 or 4-2-3-1, so Connor will have some chances to grab a starting position there.
Yeah, I know Connor Ronan is really highly rated at Wolves, but obviously he's not a first-team regular because there are guys like Ruben Neves in front of him. So I'll be really interested to see what happens with Connor Ronan at Portsmouth.
Alrighty, next up.
Yeah, is Mark Bajarski. Mark Bajarski, who I think tweeted us last night to say it took him 45 minutes to do a scouting report, and he hasn't put this much work into something since he was writing college essays.
Well, you shall soon see why.
Mark is scouting Cody Sundquist, the 18-year-old American forward for Osnabrück U19s. So a young American in Germany. Mark says, when last I was reporting, young Sundquist was scoring, and oh, what a goal did he score. I've just seen what's happening here. Since then, quiet he's been, and the goal has faded to law. There was news of a summit, but my hopes they did plummet when I learned he was not on the list. Now I will wait to learn of his fate, and when I do, I'll give you the gist.
There you go. Well done, Mark. Well done, Mark.
So that was an interesting experience for me. I didn't realize I was reading a poem until halfway through the second line.
You did well with it. You didn't try to breeze through.
I pivoted to poetry, which is what Yahoo and Fox should have done.
Yeah, sure. Dylan Veach scouting Kai Havertz, 18-year-old German attacking midfielder for Bayer Leverkusen. A few quick updates during the German winter break. In November, Kai was number 6 on 442's list of 100 best teenagers in the world. More recently, the rumor mill has started linking him with a move to Barcelona during the January window, and Dylan isn't entirely certain what to make of that. It would be good for Barcelona because they're buying like a young player and like showing that they're splashing cash on youngsters, but it also means that Kai Havertz probably wouldn't be starting as regularly, which is not ideal.
I take the same approach to Kai Havertz as I take to Christian Pulisic, which is they're in a good spot because they're starting for big teams in Germany. Don't mess with it just yet.
Agreed.
Today's final report is from former US President John Adams. Oh, no, sorry, it's not. It's not that one. It's the other John Adams, who is scouting Cheyenne Harrison, the 20-year-old English striker for the Tottenham U23s. I thought they were going to laugh at you, Tyler. You still there?
I'm still here.
Is this thing on? John says Cheyenne Harrison started in the U23's 2 most recent matches, a 0-0 draw with Sunderland and a 6-1 loss to Leicester City. Tottenham had 2 players sent off in that one. Harrison was subbed out in favour of more midfield strength. Silver lining here is that as a result, he wasn't on the pitch for Leicester's final 3 goals. Yeah, that's a pretty thin silver lining, if you ask me. Tottenham's U23 sits at the bottom of the 12-team table in Premier League 2 Division 1. It's a shock to me, and are now in danger of dropping to Division 2. As John understands it, the bottom 2 teams in Division 1 drop automatically, while the 9th and 10th place teams go into a playoff.
I would say it's weird here because like the silver lining for Spurs fans is that probably means that like young players are getting more minutes at senior level or are loaned out elsewhere, so they're not playing for the Premier League 2 team. But that means that for John Adams and Cheyenne Harrison, maybe that's a sign of things, which isn't necessarily ideal.
Yeah, maybe Josh Onomah would sort of be owning Premier League 2 right now instead of the Championship with Aston Villa.
There you
go. Well, thank you to Connor. Mark, I've just realized we've got Connor scouting Connor. Thank you to Connor, Mark, Dylan, and John for today's scouting reports. If you'd like to join the Scouting Network, again, it is totalsoccershow.com/join. Taylor, you and I were talking yesterday about whether or not we want transfer rumours coming in as part of the scouting reports. What did we come down on? Sorry, we had a long conversation. I can't remember how it ended.
I think I'm happy with rumors. What like they can just be like he's linked with this club, and this club. Like it does. Like if it's like sort of like this club, this paper reports that this guy might move here for this amount of money, but it's contingent upon this guy going here, and the manager isn't sure what to make of that. Meanwhile, he's also linked with this. Like we don't need the whole thing unless it's something more official.
just give us the rumour briefly and tell us it's a rumour, and then we can sort of get it in the scouting report. But we don't want to be accidentally reporting things that aren't fact.
There it
right?
is. Mm-hmm.
Because we don't want to be sort of, can you be catfished by rumours? I guess there's a weird version of that, right? There's got to be a soccer equivalent of that.
Just lied to?
Lied to.
Yeah.
Well, then we're redistributing bad information that way, right? So if you send in us rumours, just make sure they're succinct and they are marked as rumours. TotalSoccerShow.com/join. If you're going to send us a scout report, it's TotalSoccerShow.com/report. If you have recently asked me to get your scout to you as quickly as possible, I will be doing that today. I've blocked out some time to do it. I'm a little behind. I didn't do so well over Christmas and New Year, but I'll be getting some scouting assignments done today, I promise. It's a promise to you, Taylor, and to our listeners.
I appreciate your promises, Daryl Grove. I appreciate them indeed.
All that remains to say is thank you, Taylor Rockwell, for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, if you're looking for more content, I recommend the Top Draw Soccer Show, where Travis Clark of Top Draw Soccer and also of Howler Magazine fame and I were discussing the Winter Summit, the Youth National Team Summit, which is happening, all the youth teams down in Florida for a camp happening right now. Lots of detail about that is in that podcast. And then Taylor and I will be back, tomorrow? We're planning tentatively to watch the FA Cup third round Merseyside derby, which is 2:55 p.m. kickoff, Fox Sports 1. We're going to have a quick review of that for you Friday afternoon. Snow permitting.
Snow permitting indeed.
Permitting. Listeners, thank you for listening. We always appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.